So the three roadblocks that we'll be looking at today are how we approach mistakes, expectations, and changes. So what's your perception of mistakes, especially mistakes that you've made? It's something that I think we can't help but assess in every situation where the mistakes have been made, what didn't go right so that these results happened. And yet, when it comes to being able to move beyond that, if you can't have a healthy attitude about mistakes, that allows for you to look not so much for perfection, but simply for progress, it may become a part of the roadblock that then you take into every new situation. And in a way, it builds up its own kind of resistance to you truly feeling comfortable and confident as you keep going. So take a look for yourself at how you view past mistakes. Pay attention to the things that flare up for you, that keep coming into your mind, that help you realize that that's not a settled thing. You haven't quite settled it yet. And if you can now apply the idea that if you took perfection and that need for everything to be just so out of the equation, and you asked yourself, well, where was the progress? Where's the progress in myself? Where was the progress in the situation? Where's the progress in the relationship? Whatever you are assessing, making sure that you're being fair with the realities that we live in, which are that there is no perfection, and yet progress is what we should be truly hoping to gain, even when there have been mistakes. So especially when it comes to things that you can't change, I've talked about that in the video series on feelings, especially in that aspect on regrets. When you can't change something, it's even harder to reconcile that you feel maybe you've made some mistakes. That can be related to grieving someone who's passed away and you didn't resolve something. It can be related to a divorce or a permanent change of situation that you can't necessarily go back to. And because you're struggling with the perfection versus the progress, you may therefore feel very much like you can't show up confidently and move forward confidently because of those so-called mistakes that you feel you've made. And so be a little kinder and a little gentler with yourself, and definitely do your own introspection on where you might not have allowed yourself to make peace with what you deem are mistakes about yourself, mistakes about the situation, and look at it in terms of where you can define the progress that was gained from that, because that truly will deepen your sense of confidence. So that's one of the roadblocks that I think we face that definitely then feed us emotional lies that then, of course, really dampen our ability to feel confident. But another roadblock, one that I think we all carry from the time we're little, is expectations. So it's kind of related to mistakes because we will see certain things as mistakes because we had certain expectations. But think about, even before we were really thinking for ourselves, we were taking upon the expectations of society, of our families, of whatever situations we were in. And so when we're maturing into more emotional health that we're deciding for ourselves is ours to own and ours to cultivate, then we have to assess our confidence in relation to, well, what kind of expectations have we always held for ourselves? Have we always tried to live up to related to what other people expect or what we believe they expect? And how has that really, really stopped us from finding our own sense of balance with confidence? In this, it almost always has come down to fears for me. When I have struggled with the expectations of others, it's always come down to a fear of what if I'm not living up to those expectations? And if you're not feeling like you're living up to, or you've just decided, well, what's the point? I can't live up to those expectations. Either way, your lack of confidence will be greater because the expectations will always change, right? So it's really time to separate any fears that continue to keep you on a treadmill that isn't healthy for you, that keeps you in a sense of low confidence or constant self-doubt, and be able to acknowledge it for what it is. Okay, I see that as a fear. I see it flaring up. But when we can look at it as I see you and I know that you're there, then we can keep that separate from whether or not we really feel we're in a place that we're meant to be, doing what we want to do, believing in the rightness of it, and we will show up more confidently. So when it comes to your expectations and the expectations that are playing on repeat in the back of your mind from forever ago, it's time to pay attention to that, build your own self-awareness by introspection, by doing your own self-development work like I did. For me, it was the Fearless Living book, but there are many resources that will just help us to figure out what we're really afraid of, what expectations are reasonable, and what expectations we need to let go of, so that we can then approach our lives with much more confidence because we are meeting the expectations that we believe in. And we're not bringing every other person's expectations in to confuse and muddle our own sense of confidence about what we're doing, how we're moving forward, and how we intend to show up. So finally, let's look at the third roadblock that I find has been a huge one for me, and I think is very common for all of us, and that is changes. When it comes to our confidence, whenever changes shake up our world, shake up our life, and we're trying to figure out a new normal, then confidence is going to almost be like it's playing catch up to the rest of whatever we're dealing with. At least that was what it was like for me for a lot of years. Even though I'm very adaptable to change, I can imagine for someone who really has a hard time with changes, it can maybe be even more of a struggle. But ultimately, it still comes down to changes shaking up our sense of confidence, and then trying to find your way back to a sense of steadiness and a sense of settledness, and feeling like you're confident can be the hardest thing to do. And it's not necessarily because of the changes. So we've been through the changes of different phases of growing up. Puberty was tough, and then trying to be a young adult and adulting was tough. And then we get to the point where maybe we're having children and going through parenting. And then we're going through empty nesting. Those buggers leave, or maybe they don't leave, and we're dealing with how to deal with adult children in our own homes. So many different changes. And then on top of that, our own physical bodies, going through menopause, going through the changes of life. In all of those things, one thing that I've realized is that it's not always a confidence issue I've gone through. It's been a self-judgment or a self-acceptance issue. And so I just want to bring that perspective forward and encourage you to check in with yourself and ask yourself where you might have self-judgment or self-acceptance struggles when it comes to these changes. Like I said a moment ago, I can roll with changes. That's my nature. To be able to roll with changes is very easy for me. So I can quickly shift gears and get on board with whatever's new. I know that people in my own family are different from me in that regard, and so it can be much more difficult. But in all of those things, I really do believe that when we take away the aspects that are based in self-judgment, and the aspects that are struggling with your own self-acceptance within whatever changes you're going through, you can actually roll a lot more easily and fluidly with the changes. So I guess overall, when it comes to looking at this first focus on confidence and how roadblocks can get in the way, I want to bring it back around to the idea of arguing for your limitations. These limitations of mistakes, expectations, and changes, we can get really focused in on, yeah, but this mistake was done, or you don't understand, I'm going through certain kind of changes. And those are all valid, right? But it's up to us to self-validate, not to look for anybody else to acknowledge what we're going through. If you can self-validate, if you can be accepting and non-judgmental of wherever you are in whatever experiences you go through as you go through them, then what you're doing is you're building the ability to be confident in that situation as well as future situations. To me, it's a phenomenon of emotionally embracing what is going on and how life is unfolding. And in doing so, if I'm not resisting it and I'm bringing it along with me and adding it to my story and finding what has been gained from it and what progress I've made, as I mentioned in that part about mistakes, then what is happening is I'm actually growing my confidence. And I'm growing my confidence in my ability, and I'm going to be talking about that in the next video, where I'm looking at self-reliance and self-assurance. So when it comes to growing your confidence, introspection on how we're doing with mistakes, expectations, and changes is a great place to start. It's going to be an ongoing process of assessing those things as we go through all of our lives. But it's always good to know what to focus on so that we can take a breather from the many, many details and just kind of hone in on some of the more basic things. So that's all I have for today. I hope that this is finding you well. And I will talk to you again next week when we're going to be looking at self-reliance and self-assurance. Until then, take some time for introspection and know that growing your confidence is definitely doable, and maybe there's a little bit of letting go of some things that you didn't realize you were holding on to. When you recognize the roadblocks of life for what they are and you can set them to the side, you can move forward more confidently, and that's what this is all about. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.